How is everybody's time going listening to their heart? If you were on here on Monday, you know that I talked to Chris and we spent a significant portion of time talking about listening to our heart and what that means. And he gave a beautiful diagram about how our heart is the sun. And just like in the, let's call it a gravitational model of the universe, the earth is rotating around the sun and the moon is rotating around the earth. He was saying that feelings and emotions are like the moon, and that the moon is reflecting the sun's light. It's reflecting all that there is, which is the heart. And the feelings and emotions are the language, are the different aspects of the full spectrum of our heart. But our heart is the fullness of our feelings and emotions, which I really like that concept, because our mind is also making sense of our sense organs, right? So the mind is taking inputs from our sense organs, and then it's facilitating that into a perception that we get to tune into. And we can also tune into feelings and emotions and let that be our compass that we navigate through reality with. But then there's the full thing, which is the sun, right? Which is our center, and that's where our source is. And so listening to our center is another perspective that we can take. There's this concept that's called panpsychism. Is that the right way to say it? Yes, panpsychism. Pan means all. So all psychic, all conscious. And that's a perspective that is interesting for me to take, that everything is conscious, and that all of this is an experience that is being had on itself. And I say that because there's some people that are struggling with this life experience. And I think that we all go through these cycles of challenges. I do get messages in the inbox from people that seem like it's an ongoing thing, a decades long thing of struggling. And there's some quick tips that I can give people about that, and the differences or the ways struggles in life vary. A lot of times, from a psychological standpoint, it's not really what we think. Remember, I just talked about thoughts, and then there's what do we feel, which also isn't necessarily the full source of what there is to offer us in terms of perspective. And then there's like what actually is, which I say is like the light that is making all of this up. And as we go through challenging experiences in our life, a lot of times we feel one of those challenges could be feeling unfulfilled with life, or a lack of purpose, or a feeling of not enoughness, like not being satisfied. And if you guys feel any of that, definitely drop it in the comments so I have something to work with here. And so what we end up doing if we're not satisfied with our life is we start looking at the things in our life and we start pointing fingers at where we're unsatisfied. And if we're pointing fingers at the parts of our life where we're unsatisfied, that seems completely relevant to our mind, and even like every aspect of our being. It can feel relevant. Like, for instance, if we're career focused and things start going wrong in our life that have nothing to do with career, but then we start wondering if the career is the right career for us. And we start thinking in this like black and white way of being. And it's black and white because you've got one aspect, you've got one domain of life that's sort of ruling everything. Or maybe it's family. Maybe it's a relationship that's where a lot of your focus is. And so when you start feeling the pressure of life, you may look at the relationship and start thinking, I need to get out of this relationship. And it's completely relevant to us. And you guys know, or if you've seen people say that, like, if you get out of this relationship without fixing yourself, you're going to get into another relationship and it's going to have the same problems. And so that's sort of what I'm going to be talking about right now. Like, what does that mean? can we maneuver this in a different way? Like what do people mean that like if I don't fix my problems now, if I quit this thing and start something else, I'm going to have the same problems? I've heard many celebrities talk about this. They get rich and famous and powerful, and yet they feel the exact same as when they're, 17 and going on this journey to get rich and famous and powerful and well known. They did it, and yet nothing changed. I think Jim Carrey has a quote that says, "I wish everybody could be rich and famous so that they realize that it doesn't matter." And I think this is something that's relatively simple to solve if we know how to. So Tiffany's saying, definitely wondering if career is working for me and feeling like it's not right now. Yeah. So, and this can be relevant, but I'd like to offer another perspective. Sometimes when we are, I wonder if I can rotate this towards my whiteboard right there. No, I won't. Sometimes when we are doing one thing or we're doing a few things, I'm going to get a whiteboard because I have another one right here. This upside down. All right. So if we're doing, let's say this is our life. You guys see that? Yeah. Let's say this is our life. All of this is filled in with the thing that keeps on giving you a problem. Let's call it finding a boyfriend and attaining a boyfriend, if you're in that realm. And then it doesn't work out. And so you get rid of that boyfriend, you get a new boyfriend, and it's taking up this much of your life. And it doesn't work out. And you keep on doing that. And you keep on thinking the problem is what you're focusing on, which is a boyfriend. And this can be the same thing with career or projects or hobbies, things that you're really focusing on. If you're going through this in life and you keep on finding that the thing that you're spending the most time focused on is not working out, and you can't figure out why you're repeating the same pattern, it's likely that you're focusing too much on the thing, and that something like surrender will help you out. So what do we got here? This is what the rest of your life is, all right? So you're really trying to make this one thing work, whether it's career, relationship, project, income, turning a hobby into a profession. And then over here you have the other things. What are these other things? These other things are the other things that are important to you. So if this is like, let's say this is career, then what do we have over here? Kids, health, hobbies, relationship, exploration, self-development. What else? What else are important to us? Learning new skills, getting ourselves into situations that we have no idea. And this doesn't even exist. So I'll just make another line. Like confusing ourselves and figuring it out, laughing with friends with no agenda, meditating. So over here you have all the other aspects of our life, right? And right here is this thing that you're really, really, really trying to make work. And you're trying to force it to work. And it just keeps on not working. And so you keep on replacing this thing, thinking that it's this thing and that like maybe I'm going to go in another direction of this certain aspect. When in reality, what's happening is there's not enough focus in any of these other aspects of our life. And when there's not enough focus there, we are unfulfilled in general. We're in general unfulfilled. And so when we wake up in the morning and we have these feelings of, I hate my life, or you're looking in the mirror and you're just thinking like, this isn't it. And then we assess everything. The only thing that really comes into focus is this. And so we're thinking, this thing must suck because I'm feeling like everything sucks. So it's this thing. Because you're paying so little attention to everything else, you don't realize that the reason why you have this general feeling of anxiety and depression, it has nothing to do with this being unsatisfying. In fact, I would say that this thing is impossible to satisfy you in a full spectrum way. And so if you're trying to make this one thing, or let's say that maybe there's 3 things in there. Even if there's 2 or 3 things that you're paying attention to and you're unfulfilled in these other dimensions of life, you're going to feel, in general, unfulfilled. And the answer isn't to swap these out. It can be. I'm just saying, for those of you who have tried over and over and over again, another perspective of this is take this one, take these, and put more focus onto what's going on in all of these other life categories. And maybe some you're not focused on, but if you're analyzing your life, you may realize that the things that are important to you beyond these main three, or you haven't been focusing. And that's what you guys are saying, the video's buffering. I think it's just the autofocus on the cameras going in and out when I look at it. And then when I look away, it's trying to find a focus. So the answer isn't so much on trying to figure out this main focus, how to make it better, but it's to look at the different aspects of our life that we've been ignoring, and we can highlight those to fulfill us. And so what that does is it buffers our life so that when things aren't going so well, what we were doing before. So this is the weird thing about focusing on a few things, is that when we focus on a few things, I need an eraser here. So if we go back to the original way that the chart was going. So we've got our life, we've got the thing that's really important to us. It's filling in everything. Maybe it's two things. Maybe we do spend a significant time in our family and our career. Or maybe we have a hobby that we've made a career out of. But then we've got all of these other things. If anything happens negatively in one of these other things, like let's say you get into a car accident, all right? And one of these things that are important to you is material possessions. Well, you get into a car accident, you're feeling tremendous amount of pressure or challenge here. You still blame it on these other things. You just like all of a sudden start thinking about why these other things suck. And you don't even realize that like you experiencing challenges in one of these other things, and your brain just automatically focuses on what you're focusing on. And it starts saying that's the problem. That's not the problem. The problem is that these need to be expanded. These need to be expanded. We chat about these things in my membership, by the way. I call it skillful psyche. Learning how to do exercises with the mind so that we can figure out where our values are. And are we spending time in those values? We can figure out where our direction is in life. Reading some comments here. I try to be peaceful, but I struggle with communication and others and causes trouble. Miscommunication, and I feel I am mistaken. Okay? Struggle with communication with others, causes trouble. Causes trouble. Miscommunication, and I feel I am mistaken. That's causes trouble. I wonder what you mean by that. So I guess just to finish off and wrap on that is, if you're having this underlying feeling of sadness, and you've been working on your body and you've been trying different things, a lot of times it's what you're not focusing on, and expanding that. Go do nothing. Go be in nature. Go do the things that you used to do. Think back to what you used to do before all of these responsibilities. That's usually a good way. Like, think back to when you were a kid, or just when you were a young adult. What were the things that brought you joy? Maybe those things you've forgotten about and you push them away. And so it's not your life now as you're doing it that's giving you problems. It's the fact that you're not doing the things that fulfill you. Live as your life depends on it. Exactly, Scott. The miscommunication causes trouble with coworkers. Okay, like that's still not very, very specific. What I would recommend, which I do, I have a skillful psyche session about this, but what I would recommend is not learning nonviolent communication. So you can read an entire book on nonviolent communication. You can find a blog post on nonviolent communication. You can join my membership, 7 days free. Go to Skillful Psyche, and there's one of the sessions is about nonviolent communication. But it's essentially communicating in a way that is nonviolent, hence the name, which means you state facts as opposed to tell somebody how they're being, or tell them what they're doing to you. And that's usually what ends up causing a lot of the miscommunication, is we try to tell somebody else how they're being, which is impossible to do. You cannot tell somebody else how they're being. You cannot tell somebody else that they're making you feel a certain way, because nobody else is making you feel anyway. You're feeling it. So those are the two main things. It's looking at the words that we're using, and if you're saying to somebody else things that are going to immediately turn you into an enemy in their brain, then it's going to be very difficult to harmoniously communicate with them. Kyla's saying, I love the book Nonviolent Communication, gives such a great perspective on how to get what you want. Also, the tone influences so much, and people hear what they want to hear. People hear what they want to hear. I don't know if that's definitely true, but I don't know if we as an individual empower anybody, ourselves or them, by the statement, well, they're hearing what they want to hear. It's definitely true, but back to nonviolent communication, they're hearing what they want to hear is essentially you stating something that they're doing, which is impossible. You are not them. From the standpoint, us interacting with others and interpersonal communication, obviously we can take another perspective where there are no others and we are everybody. But by that time, we've already have mastered nonviolent communication, because there's no way to feel others as self if you are still communicating in a way that they are others. So this nonviolent communication style, or basically it's acceptance, this acceptance and learning how to communicate in a way that aligns you both to a harmonious solution in a clear and concise way. This is a skill set to gain us the ability. It opens the door for us to merge consciousness collectively. It'd be like I couldn't be one with my hand if I thought about my hand as an enemy of the body. Like if I thought my hand was trying to hurt me, it would be very difficult for me to use my hand as a part of myself. And so we also get to integrate all these different parts of ourselves, because there are parts of ourselves that a lot of us aren't in harmony with, the voices in our head. So this whole thing gets like very, very deep. We can go external with merging of self, and we can go internal, which merging all the aspects of ourself are important. And that's the work that I like to do. That's why I call my app Self-Expansion, because it's about finding harmony within yourself, expanding your concept of self first internally. And then when you can internalize harmony, where you have your thoughts in alignment with your feelings and emotions, in alignment with your heart, brain, in alignment with your gut and the bacteria in your gut, in alignment with the fascia and the fullness of the actions of the body, that is all in alignment, then we can then take that alignment and align with, quote, others in a way that they're not others anymore. And then that also allows us, it opens the door for us to also simultaneously align with everything, the all. That's what holiness is. Holiness, aligning with everything. It starts with self though, and then we expand it. Then we see ourselves, we witness ourselves in others. That's what everything is a reflection means. And then we witness ourselves in everything. And then we go towards holiness. We go towards godliness. An aspect of God is what? Omnipotent, omnipresent, omniscient. That means all powerful, omnipotent, what was the second one I said? Omnipresent means everywhere. And omniscience, or omniscience, if you break down that word means all knowing. And it's all knowing because God, or this omniscient energy, is pervasive. It's everywhere. It's living through us. I mentioned panpsychism at the beginning. That's what that word means. And panpsychism is essentially at the root of every single philosophy, every single religion, is that this life-giving, organizing, destroying even force. So that God is the creator, the organizer, the destroyer is another sort of term for God, essence. It's everywhere. Travel Wizard says it's totally about listening to the speaker. Moon Pixel says you disagree. I'm kind of behind. Yeah, I explained it. He says, he or she says, okay. I think we are taught to be passively aggressive in our communication in this society. Passive aggressive. Focus on their needs and feelings. Not so much. That's what nonviolent communication is, definitely focusing on your needs and feelings. So you'd state a fact. So instead of saying something like, you're always late, and it's effing everything up. Right? That's a pretty common statement. You're always late, so it's causing this. Or you're doing this, so it's doing that. Like, you would state something. Hey, you arrived 27 minutes. You arrived at 9:27 today. We agreed you were going to be here at 9 o'clock. And then you say something about yourself. How did that impact me? When you showed up 27 minutes late, I now no longer have the support to da 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 da. And so you see, there's no me telling them what they're doing. I literally stated a fact. You walked in the door at this time. And then how did that impact me? I say that. I was only me here. So, bum, 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 bum. And then the next step is a request for behavior change. And it completely changes the scenario, and it's based on my needs. It's not based on their needs. So we don't get to really know what their needs are unless then that happens after, right? Then the communication can go into, it can reveal in a non-violent way. It allows them to reveal in a non-violent way why they're 27 minutes late. But if you start off the conversation by saying you're always this, or because of you this, which we're saying the same thing, just we're stating it in a way that isn't violent. It's not threatening. It's not an attack. It's also not anything that can be argued. That's the real thing. Like, as soon as you start saying like, hey, you're disrespecting me. You say that to somebody, you're disrespecting me. What do you mean? You don't get to tell them what they're being towards you. We don't get to do that. We don't get to label somebody else's behavior on how they're being to us, because they are responsible for labeling their own behavior, if it's even labeling. So the moment you say something like that, you said something that disrespected me. The moment you say something like that, it immediately is grounds for them to argue against you in their mind, because then they're just thinking, no, I didn't. I said the truth. Right? So it's just learning about these little things that's not arguable in their head. You're not attacking them. You're stating a fact, how it impacted me, request for behavior change. Speak yes. And Presence Process by Michael Brown, apparently another book. Remain still whilst the other is talking. Refrain from using your body language. Thank you. Gracias. How would you turn sadness into positive energy? I like that, because let me just read the rest of these comments and I'll get back to that. When you use you, it makes people defensive. Exactly. So the reason why I like how do you turn sadness into positive energy is because it takes the focus away from getting away from sadness. It's so easy to look at a problem and think, I wish this problem wasn't here anymore. And then the focus becomes on running away from the problem, which is actually what my whole last kriya was about. Was the premise of it was that our feet are our direction in life. Our ankles are the momentum, and our standards and values are in our calves, and our intention is in our left upper leg, our motivation is in our right upper leg, and that goes up into our purpose, which is in our pelvis, which organizes our organs, organize our purpose as it starts working its way energetically up the chain. And if we're using our feet and going away from, as this person says, sadness, that's one way to go. And then the other way to go is towards desires. Right? And so a lot of times it's one or the other. But the reason why I like this question is because it's walking away from sadness into positive energy, into whatever the opposite of sadness is, where it's so easy to just think, I'm going away from what I fear. So I'm going away from what I don't like. or I'm going towards what I like. When you're going towards what you desire, you're in alignment with your standards and values. You're in alignment with yourself. You're in harmony. When you're going away from what you fear or sadness, what makes you sad, you're actually not in alignment with your standards and values, because the focus is going away from something that you do not harmonize with. But there's no direction. It's just get me away from this thing. And a lot of times that's very destructive energy, and we're just trying to burn down and get away and run away and destroy and jump over. And a lot of times we'll point fingers and cause destruction to get away from, as I called it in the Kriya, the T-Rex. We're getting away from the T-Rexes of our reality. We're just running away from the giant scary dinosaur, not being in alignment with our desires. So some of life is reharmonizing trauma, and some of life is considering the desires. Now, there's in psychology, there's this concept of when you're focusing on negative, or let's call it darkness, you're actually closing down your perspective. So you have this thing you're fixated on, and you're trying to get away from it. And that makes you start to recognize threats and start to recognize, I was going to get up and do this whole demonstration, but I need to think about this. It basically narrows your focus. It narrows your focus so you see the Tyrannosaurus Rex, and all that matters is getting away from it, which I just kind of explained. Sometimes you burn things down, sometimes you blame people, sometimes you make other people the cause of it and you get rid of them. Whereas focusing on your desires, or let's say positive, it's basically negative and positive in the literature, but that's subjective. So focusing on your desires actually widens your area perspective, where you can still inhabit within your perspective the negative, the shadow parts of your life, but you're also seeing more. You're seeing opportunities. You're seeing people as friends, or just neutral, as opposed to people as enemies. You're open to opportunities. You're lighter. And so your perspective widens, and you start to see solutions. You start to see momentum. You start to see yourself growing as a person. And so just keep that in mind. You're focusing on the darkness so much, you're trying to get from negative me, like depressed me, back to normal me. And then there's focusing on normal me to happy me. And if you look at, and again, I don't know the exact numbers. If you look into psychological experiments, most all of it has to do from getting from, let's call it dis-ease, psychological dis-ease, back to normal state. It's all focused on that, as opposed to like the normal state to a state of satisfaction. And we as a society and as a person, if we're forgetting this part, and this part's all that is pervading our thoughts, then we're only ever going to be like back to like homeostasis. I'm just walking through life without problems, which is not very fulfilling. Getting into a life that's very satisfactory is going to be fulfilling. But if we're not allowing ourselves to envision that, then we're just ever going to be to like, okay, I don't have any problems. And that's going to be our that's going to be our mountaintop. But it's not our mountaintop. So a lot of people are just trying to figure out how to get out of the hole that they're in to flat, level living, where we have the ability to fly and soar. Those are more drills though, right? It's more exercises to figure out what does that mean for us? What does happiness mean for us? Which is kind of like what I was talking about. Like, what are the things in life that are necessities for us that we're ignoring? Because back to what I was talking about, we think that we're sad because there's a problem in what we fixated on. And we tell ourselves, we justify, that's the position, that's the purpose of the mind, is to justify, it's to make sense of what we're feeling. So we feel sadness and the mind says, it must be because of this. Where are we at? This. But it's not. It's because It might be. I just want to say that. It might be. But it also might be because we're not focusing on this. And so then we get to do the work. That's what doing the work means. Where in life are we? And you guys can go back a few weeks. Another amazing, one of my most favorite skillful psyche drills that I did, which is super simple, which is based, I believe it was based on like a Harvard rewrite of the concept of a bucket list. And you make a bucket list. That's a really easy way to determine what's important to you in life. A lot of us don't think about life in terms of like the whole thing. What are we going to do before we die? And they talk to people before they die, and you know what they remember? I love this graph. Any ideas on how to stop reciting negative thought patterns? So that's called, I'm going to finish the bucket list. I don't want to get too behind on the comments. To stop reciting negative thought patterns, that's called rumination. And that's happening in your, come on, think about it. There's different parts of the brain. There's the central executive network. There's the... I don't have access to it right now, but that's happening in a part of the brain that's just rerunning the thing. And this rumination is a cause for a lot of depression, and getting into new experiences is going to help that, which I'm going to talk about next, because when you figure out what the peak life experiences are, so when they talk to people at the end of the life, what they remember are the peak moments in life. It's like this peak moments are what people remember. They don't remember the ruminating activities that they do. They remember the things that they did that are novel. And there's even science, but it goes beyond science. When something just, when you hear it and then you know it and it's true, like, an experiment doesn't really mean much. Like, I know experiments. I know that they have to be paid by somebody. And so if you're trying to prove it, and then also the people that aren't backed by the industry and they're proving experiments, they have to be validated by peers. They need to be peer reviewed journals, which means if the people reviewing the new science aren't in alignment with the new science, then the experiments don't ever get to the level of mass adoption. They don't make it into the textbooks. They don't make it into our eyeballs, and they just get forgotten about. And so some of these studies are written down, some of them aren't. So I really, it's up to us to discern what makes sense in our reality. And there's science. What was I talking about? There's science to validate. I have 3 threads that I'm trying to maintain here. Somebody help me out if you remember what I was talking about. There's science, and then I was like, well, we don't need science. Yeah, that's right, we don't. All right, back to peak entry. I'm going to go back to the question that was asked. We stopped to go on this tangent because I thought it was important, or it was in alignment. Stop reciting negative thought patterns. All right, anyways, time. Here we go. Our concept of time has to do with novelty. So Gary, you guys know Gary, right? He spent time in prison, and he talks about it all the time. Not all the time, but it's no secret. I shouldn't say why, but just because I don't actually know the exact reason, but it was because he was releasing information to the public, and the elites didn't like that. So we'll leave it at that. And in prison, he met some people that were talking about the program. And the program means that in order to make 10 years of life go by like this, you make every single day the same. And that's what prisoners do. They wake up and they do everything literally on the dot, the exact same way, day after day after day after day, and it makes it so they just coast through life where they don't really feel like they served time. It makes life go by faster if you're doing the same thing every single day. Now, the science that I was talking about was that time, our concept of time, if you guys have been feeling like time is going by faster and faster and faster, it's because every single day we're doing the same thing without novelty, without peak experiences, without experiences that we are uncoordinated in, and we need to learn our way through. And that's an aspect of this reality where everything's getting easier. We're just kind of getting and attaining things easier. And so time's just flying by because we don't have novel or different experiences. So 2 things here. I've got 2 threads of thought here. At the end of life, when you look back at it, you're going to remember these peak experiences, these experiences that were like the ones. Just think back in your life of what you remember. They're the super highs and even super lows, but you're remembering these peaks. And that's going to give you a concept of a more filled in life. If your life, you just did the same thing, those peaks aren't going to be so high. Maybe you remember your daughter's birthday, maybe you remember like you might remember some things that are happening, but then that's it. Whereas if you're constantly doing different things that you're getting highs and lows within, you're going to have a concept of life that is fulfilled. And while you're living that life, you're going to feel like the days are lasting forever. An example of this is when you go on vacation and you wake up and you do all of this stuff. You're going here, you're going there, you're seeing this thing, you're eating at this thing, you're eating this food you've never had before, you're going over here, you see it like, wow, I see all these cars, but I didn't know this car company existed. You're seeing buildings, you're like, why are there giants painted on the murals in these buildings? Why is that there? How do they do that? You're seeing all of this stuff, you're meeting these people, you're blah, 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 and you get to the end of the day and you're thinking back to breakfast and you're like, was that really today? That seems like a year ago. It seems like so long ago, but it was today. So that's time going slow because you have all of these novel experiences that you're not used to. So at the end of the day, it feels like literally a year went by. And I'm saying this from experience, by the way, guys. I'm not saying that I'm above this. I'm saying this because I have went through this. A year went by, but really what that is your brain's calibrating to how much normally happens in a year, and that all just happened in a day. So you're like, man, it feels like that happened last year, but it was this morning. And so imagine days happening like that. This would happen naturally. That's what seasons are. There's spring and fall and winter and summer, and they're all different. There's different plants, there's different animals, there's different weather. Nowadays, we're at 72 degrees Fahrenheit every single day. Light, perfect lighting. You guys should see the amount of lighting I have around me right now. It's perfect. It's the exact ambience that I created. And sunset, sunrise, I go view those. But it's as easy as a flip of a switch. For us, we're not recognizing the changes that are happening all around us. There's a friend of mine, his name is Mick Dodge, and I'm gonna just read some of these comments before I go on to Mick Dodge. All right, so this friend of mine, Mick Dodge, he actually has 3 seasons of a show on the Discovery Channel called The Legend of Mick Dodge. The reason why they did the show on him is because he lived in the Hoh rainforest in Washington, which is I think it's the wettest place in America, meaning it rains the most. He lived there without a house, without shelter for 12 years. He was digging holes in the ground, setting a fire, letting the fire die down into coals, putting blankets over the coals, and then he told me he would have 6 hours of heat under his blanket. He would sleep under trees. He would do all this stuff in the forest. A lot of times he was barefoot, mostly naked, and there would the townspeople would talk about this legendary guy that would sometimes pop out, and he would be this naked man running through the forest. Eventually the Discovery Channel caught wind of this. They did some segments on it. But anyways, he didn't have a vehicle. And so if he had a friend that wanted to see him that would take 3 hours by car, he would walk there. And it would take him 2 weeks to get there. And then the Discovery Channel did all these shows on him. And then he bought 2 vehicles. He bought 2 vans. He has now a big property with land and He's got a barn with a gym in it, and his concept of a gym is amazing. It's like one of my favorite things ever. His whole concept of fitness is fitting into the nest. So I'm gonna get to what's important about what he said, which isn't this, but I'm a fitness person, right? So CrossFit has their own. So CrossFit's definition of fitness is based on intensity. So CrossFit is force times distance over the amount of time it took you. So this is actually the definition of power. And so CrossFit defines fitness by your ability to demonstrate power across modal domains, so across many different domains and many different time periods. So you might have to run 2 miles with a 45-pound pack. Your ability to demonstrate power and be able to deadlift the most weight possible, which is like a 5-second effort, be able to swim, be able to throw, be able to balance, be able to, like, basically there's 10 aspects of fitness that we're demonstrating power in, and that's CrossFit's definition of fitness. Mick Dodge's definition of fitness, which I would really like to support and create a movement around, is fitting into the nest. How many nests, so he takes the fitness and says fit nests. How many nests can we fit into? So an example of a nest would be like the city nest. So it's the city nest would be an example of a nest. Can you guys, where are we at here? An example of a nest is the city nest. And another example of a nest would be like the forest nest. And then another example of the nest would be like in between there. And his whole fitness philosophy is like your ability to fit into the different nests, different environments determines your fitness level. And for him, that makes sense, right? He lived in the forest for 12 years. My point of all of this is that I've learned a lot from him. I went and stayed with him for a little bit. He made me sleep, I got to sleep in a cot in the barn next to this gym where he makes all of his own equipment. And it's just, he's a beautiful man. But anyways, just in terms of how his brain thinks. So he told me that when he got all this money from doing these shows, he bought vehicles and now he drives. And at the time, it was right when this happened, is when I was having this conversation with him. And he was telling me that what he noticed is that driving completely disrespects the environment. He says you just drive by everything and you completely miss all of reality when you drive. He even says biking does that, because this was a walker. This is someone who would walk days to get somewhere, as opposed to driving hours to get there. Did I say weeks earlier? Probably like 5 days, not 2 weeks. So he would walk days to get somewhere, just sleep on the side of the road and continue walking. And when you walk, you notice things. And this is what I'm talking about. Time is going by so slow for us because we're noticing less. We think we're noticing more because we got these devices and we're like, oh, person doing a triple backflip off of a building and landing on their back, how do they survive? And then cat video, and then explosion, and then Mr. Beast making all these weird things and paying people a lot of money and destroying Lamborghinis. And we're just like, guys, after you go on a doom scroll, see if you can even remember what you looked at. That stuff isn't a real experience. It like somehow goes into us and it just goes into like it just almost turns our entire life into a black hole. So that's actually taking time away from us. And then on top of that, when we go through life, because we're doing this and getting hyper stimulated, we don't even notice the things. There's this analogy, this, you guys know this. Stop and smell the roses. Like all of the roses of life that we would used to notice, we're not noticing anymore because we just saw somebody buy 1 million roses and give it to some stranger online. So like the things that we see in real life, we're not even noticing. We're driving by them fast. We're just not noticing them, which is condensing time. It's making time go fast. That's what's happening with the time thing. And we can easily make time go slower. Trust me. If you don't believe me, go on a vacation, pack your day full of stuff. You're going to get to the end of the day and it's going to be shocking when you remember back to what you were doing before breakfast and you're like, what the heck? And you actually make sense of it. It's going to feel like that happened a week ago, a month ago, a year ago. And that's going to correlate. You can do algebra. You can do an equation to say like, okay, if my brain feels like this morning was a week ago, then that means that I do this amount of activity in a week, and I just did it in a day. Wake up early, do stuff back to back to back to back to back all day long. You do that when you go on vacation. The reason why I'm saying vacation is because they're different things than what you're doing back to back to back to back all day long. And so then you're like, well, I have to do these things back to back to back to back to back. Remember what I started this whole thing off talking about? You're doing the things back to back to back to back in this realm. And what I'm suggesting is let's expand everything else so that the things that you're doing back to back to back to back to back are new for you. They're novel, they're exciting, and that's going to allow your life to be more fulfilled. I keep on saying this word, fulfilled. It means filled in. It doesn't mean you're coasting through it without feeling anything. That's going to lead you to depression, sadness, anxiety. Fulfillment comes from when you think back on the day, you're like, yeah, freaking life is awesome. Like, wow. You're thinking, wow, I'm satisfied. And tomorrow is another one. And that's answering the question a half hour ago. That's how you walk away from sadness into the light. Give yourself novel experiences as opposed to ruminating on the same old stuff all day long. Guys, I enjoyed this so much. I am at the end of time though. Thank you for the comments. As you guys know, the Human Garage channel is banned again right now over talking about hydration and mineralization, which is really important nowadays because the minerals are actually what is the conduit of energy that flows in through the body. So mineralization is extremely important for our body function. And that's actually what our fascia is made up of. And our fascia is piezoelectric, which means that it's actually like a superconductor. It's conducting this flow of energy. So anyways, I'm saying that because when you get on these lives with me or anybody else, share it to a few people. Because it used to be when we started Alive on Human Garage, like it would start with like 80 to 150 people would be like on immediately, like just like boom, without even like, that would be the baseline. And then it would go up or down based on if the people were interested. Now you start Alive on HG and the baseline is like 4 people. And then it's either going to stay there or go up. So when you see anybody else on live, share this information. It's obviously valuable, guys. There's tens of thousands of people following every single week, and that's because it's valuable to people. We're being held down, we're being suppressed. It's okay, it's somebody else's platform. They have the right to do so, to satisfy their own agenda. We're playing on their game, on their platform, which is amazing. But what you can do to help, if it's helping you out, is that when you jump on one of these lives, share it out to 5 to 10 people. Just do it for the algorithm. It's going to help out, and those 5 to 10 people will get something out of the video as well. Bye bye, everybody. Thank you so much for your time and your comments. I love you all.